Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So first things first today, Paul has been cracking on stripping the Lotus twin cam engine, so I'm going to leave you with him for a minute just to explain, see what he's found.
Afternoon guys, I finally stripped down this Lotus twin cam engine. We did a little video on Wednesday, but the crank's still on the block, the head was still complete, and we had a quiet assessed it. So I've got the crank out, sort of checked the bearings, taking the piston off the rods. I've got the head stripped down, so I think I'll do a little video and go through it with you. Right, so I stripped, cleaned and soda blasted the head. It's come out quite nicely. The ports are all clean, no more soot in the exhaust ports, which is ideal. First thing you notice, obviously, being a race engine, it has 3-angle valve seats, which is quite typical. I've checked the play in the guides, and on the inlets, they're perfect really. It's not any play in it at all. And on the exhaust, it's a tiny bit more play, but there's nothing really there, so we don't have to change the guides. We're happy with that. Lee spoke to the customer last night, and this damage here on the head has actually happened quite a long time ago, so it's nothing to do with what's happened recently, so I'm not too worried about that. A little bit of pitting on the head face, but that's nothing too much to worry about, to be honest with you. It's an old engine from the 60s, so there's going to be some corrosion. I think what we'll do is we'll give this a 5-hour lick over, see how it comes out. We don't want to take too much off the head because the valves, or the inlet valves at least, are actually starting to poke out very slightly anyway, so it's had a lot off it already, and we don't want to be sort of messing with the compression ratio too much. The gasket on it originally was a MLS gasket, a metal gasket, which is about 1.2 mil thick, crushed. So I think what we'll do is we may have to go, if a gasket size, if we've got to take a lot off the head, but we'll do some measurements and find out. Heading over to the block and the rest of the parts now. The main bearings over here actually look pretty good. There's nothing really wrong with them. It's a sort of small, well, there's a score mark there. That could just be from startup. But overall, they look in pretty good nick actually, you know, they're not bad at all. Obviously, we've got the piston off the rods. You can see the heat marks from where number 1 bearing had spun and they'll be running. The rest of the rods look okay, but I think what we'll do is we will replace that rod. Don't really want to be reusing that anyway. So we'll obviously speak to the customer and hopefully get the duration and lift off for these cams, so when we time it up, we can get it spot on. Also notice that the engine had its original camshaft in the block as well. I should imagine that's there so it can drive the oil pump, because the oil pump drives off this part on the camshaft. Whether when they race them they put something else in there to get rid of that camshaft, I don't know, but that was still in there. I also found out that the problem wasn't low compression. On the original video we did say the engine was down on compression. It wasn't, it was down on oil pressure, which obviously ties in with the fact that the bearings are spun and are knackered on number 1. I think the root cause is probably this pickup, this contraption. I should imagine it's probably broken and then sucked in air, started banging with oil for a few seconds. That's all it takes really, and it's picked up. The bores themselves are actually not bad condition. There's some score marks, but I've seen much worse. But I'm not quite sure what we're going to do yet with these. I don't know if we're going to bore it or not, or see if those marks are honed out, but we'll find out really. It's got to be spot on, it's a race engine, so yeah, we'll do what we need to do. My next job, or my current job at the moment, is this V6 Renault engine. Started this earlier and I managed to get all the belt guides and tensioners off, all the sprockets off. These are what come off to get this belt cover backing off, and once they're off we'll work the head off and see what the problem is. This is the one with the low compression, so I'm expecting to see maybe a knackered bore or a knackered piston or something. When I turned it over earlier it was a little bit notchy, so that could explain the same part of the problem. So we'll get into this and report back.
Right guys, as you can see on our milling machine we have a piston. Just put another cut on there, So this is a piston, forged piston out of the Vauxhall, the red top engine that we're doing. So what we have done is we've done a dummy build. We've put the piston loosely on the conrod, put it down the hole, and with the crank on TDC, and measured the jut out, and we've got 27 thou. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking 13 thou off this, and we are going to end up with about 14 thou protrusion. 12 to 14 is about what I like to run, because obviously we took about 10 thou off this block that we got. So Isaac's very kindly cleaned this block up thoroughly. As you can see, you've got new core plugs in, which are an absolute arse to get out. So he's de-rusted it, painted it good old-fashioned black. We bored it, faced it. As I say, I took 10 thou off the block face, so we've had to tromp some off the pistons. The rods are all sized here and balanced. So Isaac, as I say, he's put the crank in this morning, haven't you, mate? And torqued it all up. So I think the customer's going to come in and bring us some more bits today. So hopefully we should have the bottom end pretty much built on this. So the only thing you have to do once you've took whatever you need to off the crowns of these is obviously, because you've got the big cutouts in there, we need to deburr it good and proper all round the edge, make sure the burr's off so we've got no flashing, and inside of the cutouts here. Now these cutouts are about 6mm deep, so they're real deep cutouts, and the crown of this piston is about 12 thou thick. It's a real, a real thick crown on it, plus it's a forged piston. So there's plenty of meat there. They know that you're going to have to chomp some off once you've done your dummy build to get your piston protrusion right. So our setup here on the mill, we can't set these up in the lathe because the skirts are too narrow, so obviously with a 3-jaw chuck you can't set it up. So we set it up on here. So what we do, we put a pin in the block, a bar through the middle, and just lightly clamp it. So we're not clamping down with any real force here, just enough to hold it so it don't spit it off when you're cutting it, basically. So don't think that we're distorting the piston. Right, mate, so here we've got a normal circlip type piston. So for your information, Isaac wants to know how to put a conrod onto a piston with the normal basic circlip type. The only one I've showed him at the moment is the shrink-on fit onto the conrods. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So on these internal circlips, you've got two type. You've got this basic one here, which is just like a bit of bent wire, and then you've got, on the older stuff, sometimes you've got with the little sort of holes in either end that you can use the circlip pliers, but not very often. Usually on the modern stuff, we have these ones.
Okay.
So this is the way that I put them on. First of all, what we do is, it's paramount importance that you make sure you get everything on the right way, so you ain't got to take it apart. So on the conrod, we've got the 3 dots here because this is a number 3 rod. We've done 2 already. That's 2 that we made earlier, as they say. The holes, the dots here are towards the front of the rod, so that side of the rod goes to the front of the engine. Okay.
Yeah.
Here we've got a piston that we've already faced off, so we want to find the front of the piston. So with this particular engine, you see the bigger valve pockets are the inlets, obviously, because the inlets are the bigger valves. They go to the right hand side of this engine. Okay, so what we do is we mark, I always do this, mark a little arrow that goes to the front of the engine, just so we don't get confused, and then we lay them out like that. Now first of all, what we want to do is put one circlip in one side. Okay, so what I do is take the circlip like this with the open end going backwards, and I just push the circlip halfway up that groove, and then turn it round as much as you can. So you see the open end had just gone into the groove there.
So it starts sitting in the groove.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then what I do is just put the pin in here, dry, and push it back very gently until it snaps into that groove. Okay. Now, it's very important, especially on these modern forge types, that you make sure that the circlip is, although it's snapped in, make sure that it is pushed back in the groove.
Right.
Okay. Because the groove is a very tight fit with these circlips. They don't leave any sort of wiggle room for it. So we double check, just visually make sure that is sat right back. You'd tell if it isn't, because you'd have you'd see a bit more of a thicker side of the circlip. So every time you do a process, just make sure that you've got the front where it should be. Okay.
Okay.
So now that one's in, what we do is just run a bit of oil on my finger into either side of the piston, Okay, and we just want to oil the pin. Don't need to go mad with the oil. A lot of people, like John, he likes to use gallons of it, but no point really. So then you put the pin the opposite side to where the circlip's in. Just put the pin in up to the edge there. Oil the small end. And then just before you do it, just double check, make sure it's all going to go in the right way. Small end down there. And just make sure it all slides in and push the pin right back to that circlip, okay? And just make sure it all moves freely. Now the fun bit is getting this circlip in. So what you do, on every piston you'll see a little groove just outside the hole, and that groove there is it's just a little notch, it's just to lever this circlip in.
So that you can get like a tool in there or something.
That's right. So this is the tool in question. This is just an old, I expect you can get proper tools, but this is just an old screwdriver that I've ground to a point really. So what you do, you take the open end to the right hand side of this little notch, leaving about sort of 5mm overhanging that notch, a bit like that, yeah?
Yeah.
Just it gives you enough to lever in at the end of it. Then what you do is you push the other end in first, and then halfway around the circlip, just feed that in. So now you've got sort of half of the circlip in that hole. Push it down as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then the last little bit, you want to get your tool down into that groove and just lever that circlip into the groove until it snaps in, all right? Now, when you've done that, like I said on the other side, a lot of the time on these forged pistons, the pin is going to be machined so it's right up close to either side of the circlip, so the pin isn't moving in the piston. That's the design of it, okay? So it only moves inside of the small end bush. So what you've got to do is just make sure that that circlip is pushed down into the groove and it looks even all the way around, okay?
Yeah.
If you don't, that circlip can come out and you can imagine the damage it'll do to the bore. So that's the third one done, mate. I'm going to leave the, once we've finished machining that piston, I'm going to leave the fourth one for you to have a go.
Okay.
All right?
I'll do my best.
See how you get on.
Cool.
There we go, guys. As you can see, Isaac has got all the pistons in now. We've got all the jut out on the pistons right. All we've got to do is just torque up the big ends. Customer has been in actually to bring us some more pulleys. You can see the original pulleys there, which are pretty nasty. But the only thing we're waiting for is some high lift cams from Newman. And he has dropped in, I'll show you here, some rather pretty vernier pulleys. So as soon as we get those cams and the heads on, which is going to be obviously early part of next week, hopefully we can get this thing all put together and timed up, and by this time next week we should have this little baby done. So if I just take you around the back here and show you the rocker cover. So this is the rocker cover that Isaac was blasting and sanding down last week. You can see we've gone for a nice red colour. Still got to give this another coat and then a coat of lacquer, and I think the guy's going to do the centrepiece there black. Lovely. Right guys, the kit car, I've had a bit of a nightmare in this last week. So I was going up a dual carriageway on the way back from Ilfracombe, and I changed gear and it sort of jolted to the right. Changed gear again and I got a big jolt and it almost catapulted me into the other lane. Luckily there was no oncoming traffic. I was sort of half in the lane. I thought, what the hell's happened that? I thought it had broke a drive shaft or something. So I limped it home, and you can see that wheel down there is looking a bit negative camber. So we got a torch down here, and if you can see down the bottom there, you see the bracket that holds the bottom arm has broke away from the chassis. And the alarming thing is that if we feel that bracket, that is literally, I would say, no more than about 2mm thick, and that's just snapped away from the weld. So I'm pretty shocked by that. The back brackets are more like 4 or 5mm, but still probably not thick enough, but they are just no good at all. Bear in mind we've done 2 track days in this, even since we put the roll cage in it. So I'm pretty happy with everything else that Mark's done. He's done all the the webbing on the joints and what have you. The top brackets look nice thick material, but the bottom ones, they're coming off. We're going to take these arms off. We're going to make new brackets there and weld them in with bracing, and probably put a brace across here as well down the bottom. But yeah, that could have been a lot worse, guys. I suppose in some respects I'm pretty lucky really that we didn't plough me into oncoming traffic. But yeah, that's shocking down there. I can't believe that MNR have let that out like that. Well, on that slightly negative note, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you have a lovely weekend. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you in another video. Cheers.